What happens when death itself becomes just another obstacle for humanity to overcome? When the very concept of permanent defeat crumbles before human determination. The Zelkari Empire thought they understood warfare. They thought they understood fear. They thought they understood the limits of biological life. They were wrong on every count. In the depths of space, on a forgotten battlefield where empires clash and species fall, one human soldier is about to teach an entire galactic civilization that some things are far more terrifying than death itself. Because when humans refuse to stay dead, when they return from the void with memories intact and vengeance burning in their hearts, even the most powerful empire in the galaxy must learn to fear. This is the story of Marcus Chun, a sniper whose final shot echoed across the stars, whose death lasted exactly 40 minutes and 17 seconds, and whose return shattered every scientific law the galaxy thought they knew. This is the story of how one man's refusal to accept defeat changed the course of an interstellar war. Some say death is the great equalizer. They've never met a human. The morning sun of Kepler 442b cast long shadows across the crystalline mountains where Staff Sergeant Marcus Chun lay motionless, his rifle steady against the rocky outcrop. 3 days he had been in this position, watching the Zelkari forward operating base through his scope, counting patrols, mapping defensive positions, waiting for the perfect shot. His ghillie suit, modified for the alien terrain, made him invisible against the purple-tinted rocks and strange vegetation that carpeted this distant world. The Zelkari Empire had swept through this sector like a plague, consuming worlds and enslaving species with methodical efficiency. Their gray-skinned soldiers moved with the confidence of beings who had never known defeat, their energy weapons crackling with lethal potential. For 2 years, humanity had been pushed back, outgunned, and outnumbered by an enemy that seemed to possess technology beyond their wildest dreams. But Marcus Chun represented something the Zelkari had failed to account for in their calculations. He represented human stubbornness, human precision, and the kind of focused hatred that came from watching friends die in alien soil. Every kill he made was personal. Every shot was for Earth, for the colonies that had fallen, for the soldiers who would never see home again. Through his scope, he watched the base commander emerge from the central structure. General Thaxmore, according to intelligence reports, was responsible for the orbital bombardment of New Geneva. 30 million civilians had died in that attack. Marcus had seen the footage. He had memorized every detail of the Zelkari's elongated skull, the way his mandibles clicked when he spoke, the arrogant swagger in his gait. The wind shifted slightly, and Marcus adjusted his position by mere millimeters. At this distance, nearly 2 kilometers, everything mattered. The atmospheric density was different here, the gravity slightly lighter than Earth standard. He had spent weeks learning how these factors affected his shots, how the alien air currents moved through the mountain passes. The base below was a testament to Zelkari efficiency. Geometric structures rose from the valley floor in perfect symmetry, their surfaces gleaming with the same metallic sheen as their armor. Energy shields flickered around key installations, and automated defense turrets tracked constantly across the perimeter. It was a fortress designed to repel conventional assault, but it had not been designed to stop a single human with a rifle and an unlimited capacity for patience. Marcus controlled his breathing, feeling his heartbeat slow to the rhythm he had perfected over countless missions. In the military, they called him the Ghost of Titan Station after he had held off an entire Zelkari advance with nothing but his rifle and superior positioning. The enemy had started calling him something else entirely, a word in their language that roughly translated to Deathbringer. He wore that title like a badge of honor. The target moved closer to the optimal position, unaware that death was watching him through crosshairs crafted on Earth. General Thaxmore paused to examine something on a portable display, his body presenting the perfect profile for what Marcus had planned. The human sniper had been tracking this particular Zelkari for months, learning his habits, studying his routines, waiting for exactly this moment. Around the base, other Zelkari went about their duties with the mechanical precision their species was known for. They were tall, thin beings with pale gray skin and eyes like black pearls. Their technology was undeniably superior to humanity's, their ships faster, their weapons more powerful, their armor more advanced. But they lacked something that Marcus possessed in abundance: the willingness to lie motionless in hostile terrain for days, eating ration paste and recycled water, all for the chance to place one perfect shot. The scope's reticle settled over the general's center mass. Marcus began his breathing cycle, letting his body relax into the familiar routine. In through the nose, hold for 3 seconds, out through the mouth, hold for 2. His finger found the trigger, applying the lightest possible pressure, feeling the familiar resistance that preceded the moment of truth. But as he prepared to fire, something changed in the valley below. Zelkari soldiers were moving with sudden urgency, their usual disciplined formations becoming scattered and reactive. Through his scope, Marcus could see weapons being raised, targeting systems coming online. Someone was shouting orders in the harsh, guttural language of the Empire. They had found him. Marcus cursed silently as he realized what had happened. The Zelkari had finally adapted their sensors to detect human heat signatures. After months of successful sniper operations across multiple worlds, they had developed countermeasures. Red, targeting beams began sweeping the mountainside, searching for the source of their torment. The logical choice would have been to withdraw. Marcus had escape routes planned, fallback positions prepared. A good sniper knew when to take the shot and when to fade into the landscape. But as he watched General Thaxmore being hustled toward the safety of the bunker complex, Marcus made a decision that went against every tactical principle he had ever learned. He was going to take the shot anyway. The targeting beam swept closer to his position, its red glow painting the rocks around him. In seconds, they would have him locked. The energy weapons would follow immediately after, turning his hiding spot into a crater of superheated glass. But Marcus Chun had not crawled through 2 kilometers of hostile terrain and waited 3 days in position to let his target escape. He centered the crosshairs on the moving figure of General Thaxmore and gently squeezed the trigger. The rifle bucked against his shoulder with familiar authority. The electromagnetically accelerated projectile left the barrel at nearly 3 times the speed of sound, crossing the distance to the target in less than a second. Marcus watched through his scope as the round found its mark, striking the Zelkari general's center mass and dropping him instantly to the metallic ground. The satisfaction of a successful shot lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then, the mountainside exploded around him. Zelkari plasma cannons opened up from multiple positions, their energy beams carving through rock and metal alike. The air itself seemed to catch fire as the alien weapons discharged, sending waves of superheated atmosphere rolling across the landscape. Marcus felt the heat wash over him even as he scrambled for cover, his ghillie suit beginning to smolder from the intense energy discharge. A second volley of plasma fire struck closer, and Marcus felt the ground beneath him crack and shift. The rocky outcrop that had provided perfect cover was being systematically demolished by weapons that could melt through tank armor. He rolled behind a larger boulder just as another beam carved through the space where he had been lying. The Zelkari were not content with simply killing him. They wanted to obliterate him completely, to ensure that the human sniper who had been haunting their operations would never threaten them again. More weapons joined the bombardment, heavy guns that Marcus could hear spinning up from their positions around the base. They were bringing everything they had to bear on his location. Marcus checked his equipment with practiced efficiency. His rifle was intact, but the scope had been damaged by flying debris. His communication gear was dead, fried by the electromagnetic pulse from the plasma weapons. His escape routes had been cut off by the bombardment, leaving him trapped on a mountainside with nowhere to run. Through gaps in the smoke and flying rock, he could see Zelkari troops moving up the mountain toward his position. They were advancing in the careful, methodical manner of soldiers who knew their enemy was trapped. Energy shields flickered around their forms, deflecting the occasional piece of debris, while their weapons swept back and forth in search of targets. Marcus had been in desperate situations before, but this felt different. This felt final. The Zelkari had committed significant resources to ensuring his death, and they were not the type of enemy to leave such things to chance. Still, he was not going to make it easy for them. He activated the explosive charges he had placed along his planned escape routes. The detonations sent cascades of rock tumbling down the mountainside, hopefully slowing the advancing enemy forces. It would not stop them for long, but it might buy him a few more minutes to find another way out. The plasma bombardment had shifted to a more precise targeting pattern now, systematically destroying every piece of cover on the mountainside. The Zelkari were being thorough, making sure there was nowhere for a human sniper to hide. Marcus found himself forced to move from position to position, staying just ahead of the devastating energy beams. His rifle spoke twice more during the retreat, each shot carefully placed to take down advancing soldiers. But for every Zelkari that fell, two more appeared to take their place. They were surrounding the mountain, cutting off every possible avenue of escape. Marcus began to understand that this was not just about killing one troublesome sniper. This was about sending a message to all of humanity. The end came suddenly and brutally. A plasma beam caught him in the shoulder as he moved between cover points, spinning him around and sending his rifle flying. The pain was immediate and overwhelming, like being struck by liquid fire. The smell of burning flesh filled his nostrils as he collapsed against a rocky wall, his left arm useless and his vision blurring. Zelkari soldiers surrounded him within minutes, their weapons trained on his position. Through the haze of pain and smoke, Marcus could see their alien faces, could hear them speaking in their harsh language. One of them, probably an officer based on the additional markings on his armor, approached with obvious satisfaction. The alien spoke in accented English, his voice carrying the clicking undertones of his species. "You're the one they call the Ghost, the killer of Thaxmore. The Empire has been looking for you for many months." Marcus tried to respond, but found that his throat was too dry, his lungs too damaged by the superheated air. He settled for glaring at his captors with all the defiance he could manage. The officer seemed amused by this. "Do not worry, human. Your death will serve a greater purpose. The Empire has plans for creatures like you, plans that require extensive study." What followed was systematic and methodical, designed not just to kill, but to extract every piece of information possible about human capabilities. The Zelkari had questions about sniper training, about human tactics, about the locations of resistance bases. They had ways of encouraging answers that went far beyond simple interrogation. Marcus gave them nothing. Even as their devices worked on his nervous system, even as they demonstrated the various ways their technology could induce agony, he remained silent. The training was too deep, the hatred too strong, the knowledge too important to give away. Time became fluid under their ministrations. Minutes stretched into hours. Hours collapsed into seconds. Marcus found his consciousness drifting in and out as the alien equipment pushed his nervous system beyond its limits. Through it all, he held on to two things: the memory of General Thaxmore falling to his rifle shot, and the absolute determination not to give these creatures anything they could use against the species. The end, when it finally came, was almost a relief. Marcus felt his heart stop beating, felt his lungs cease their desperate struggle for air. The pain faded to nothing, replaced by a darkness that seemed to welcome him. His last conscious thought was a prayer that his death would buy his fellow humans just a little more time. The Zelkari verified his death with their medical equipment, confirming the cessation of all biological functions. They had learned nothing from him, but they had eliminated one of the most effective human operatives in the sector. The body was prepared for disposal according to standard protocol, another casualty in the Empire's inexorable advance across the galaxy. Neither the Zelkari nor Marcus himself knew that death was about to become just another tactical challenge for humanity to overcome. The first sensation was cold, not the gradual chill of a winter morning or the sharp bite of mountain air, but the absolute bone-deep cold of space itself. Marcus Chun became aware of his surroundings slowly, like surfacing from the deepest possible sleep. His eyes opened to unfamiliar stars scattered across an alien sky, their light filtering down through atmosphere he had never breathed before. He was lying on his back in what appeared to be a medical facility, though the architecture was distinctly non-human. Curved walls rose around him in organic patterns, their surfaces gleaming with the same metallic finish he had seen in Zelkari installations. Strange symbols pulsed with soft light along the ceiling, and the air carried the ozone scent of advanced technology. Marcus tried to sit up and was surprised when his body responded without pain. His shoulder, which had been ruined by plasma fire, moved freely and without discomfort. His hands, which had been burned and torn during his final fight, appeared completely unmarked. Even his throat, which had been damaged by the superheated air, felt clear and strong. The memories came flooding back all at once. The shot that killed General Thaxmore. The bombardment that had trapped him on the mountainside. The capture, the interrogation, and finally, the methodical torture that had ended with his death. He remembered dying. He remembered the exact moment when his heart had stopped beating and consciousness had faded to black. Yet here he was, very much alive and apparently unharmed. A figure moved in his peripheral vision, and Marcus turned to see a being unlike any he had encountered before. Tall and graceful, with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer in the artificial light. The creature had large, dark eyes that conveyed intelligence, and something that might have been compassion. When it spoke, its voice carried musical undertones that made Marcus think of wind chimes. "Please remain calm," the being said in perfect English. "You have experienced what your species might call a miracle, though we understand it differently. You are safe, and you are very much alive." Marcus's hand moved instinctively to where his sidearm should have been, but found nothing. His tactical gear was gone, replaced by a simple gray garment that felt more comfortable than it had any right to. The blue-skinned alien seemed to notice this movement and raised what might have been a hand in a gesture of peace. "Weapons are not needed here," the creature continued. "We are not your enemies. Indeed, we may be the answer to humanity's greatest challenge." "Who are you?" Marcus managed to ask, his voice working perfectly despite his memories of throat damage. "We are the Etherians," the being replied. "We are what your species might become, given time and proper guidance. We have been watching the conflict between your people and the Zelkari Empire with great interest. More specifically, we have been watching you." Marcus swung his legs over the side of what he now realized was not a medical table, but something closer to an altar. The surface beneath him thrummed with subtle energy, and he could feel residual warmth emanating from its crystalline structure. Everything about this place spoke of technology so advanced that it bordered on the mystical. "The Zelkari killed me," Marcus said, testing the words as much as informing his host. "I felt myself die. I remember it ending." The Etherian moved closer, its movements flowing like liquid grace. "Death is not the binary condition that most species believe it to be. Consciousness, the essence of what you are, can be preserved, transferred, and restored under the right circumstances. What you experienced was death, as your primitive understanding defines it. What we provided was resurrection, as we have learned to achieve it." "Why?" Marcus asked, the single word carrying all of his confusion and suspicion. "Because humanity stands at a crossroads," the Etherian replied. "The Zelkari Empire represents stagnation, the end of growth and evolution for all the species they consume. Your people represent something different. You possess qualities that the universe has not seen in millions of years. Qualities that we ourselves once possessed but have since lost." The alien gestured, and the walls around them became transparent, revealing a view that took Marcus's breath away. They were aboard a ship, but not any ship he could have imagined. It stretched for kilometers in every direction, its hull incorporating living architecture that pulsed with organic rhythms. Outside, stars wheeled in patterns that suggested they were moving at velocities that should have been impossible. "Your species refuses to accept defeat," the Etherian continued. "Even in the face of overwhelming odds, even when confronted with technology centuries beyond your own, you continue to fight. You adapt, you overcome, you find ways to turn disadvantage into victory. This quality is precious beyond measure." Marcus studied the alien's face, looking for signs of deception, but finding only what appeared to be genuine admiration. "You're talking about my people like we're some kind of commodity. In a sense, you are," the Etherian admitted, "but not in the way the Zelkari see you. They view other species as resources to be consumed or obstacles to be eliminated. We see humanity as the key to something much greater, the key to our own salvation." The ship around them hummed with power that Marcus could feel in his bones. Through the transparent walls, he could see other vessels moving in formation, their designs incorporating the same organic architecture as the ship he was aboard. Whatever the Etherians were, they commanded technology that made both human and Zelkari achievements look primitive by comparison. "We have been dying for thousands of years," the alien explained, its musical voice taking on a note of sadness. "Not physically, but spiritually. We achieved technological mastery so complete that we lost the capacity for growth, for struggle, for the kind of desperate innovation that comes from being pressed to the limits of survival. We became perfect, and in becoming perfect, we became static." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's atmosphere. "You want to use us? We want to learn from you," the Etherian corrected. "We want to remember what it means to fight for something greater than ourselves, to refuse defeat, even when all logic suggests surrender is the only option. And in exchange, we want to give your species the tools they need to not just survive, but to thrive." The implications were staggering. Marcus thought about the war that was raging across known space, about the human colonies falling one by one to Zelkari expansion. If these Etherians truly commanded technology that could change the balance of power, the entire conflict could be decided by their intervention. "What exactly are you proposing?" Marcus asked. "We are proposing to resurrect you," the alien said, "to send you back to the war with knowledge and capabilities that will help your species understand what they're truly capable of. You will become the first of your kind to experience what we call the eternal return." "I'm already resurrected," Marcus pointed out. The Etherian made a sound that might have been laughter. "This is merely the first stage. True resurrection requires that you choose it, that you embrace it, fully understanding what it means. We can send you back to your people, but the power we offer comes with responsibilities that not all beings can accept." Marcus thought about his squad, probably dead by now. He thought about the human colonies still fighting desperate, holding actions against Zelkari forces. He thought about Earth itself, still free, but increasingly isolated as the Empire tightened its grip on the galaxy. "What kind of responsibilities?" "You will become something new," the Etherian explained. "Still human, but enhanced beyond normal biological limitations. You would retain your memories, your skills, your personality, but you would also possess abilities that your species does not yet understand. More importantly, you would become a bridge between what humanity is now and what it might become." The ship's movement changed subtly, and Marcus realized they were dropping out of whatever faster-than-light travel they had been using. Through the transparent walls, he could see a familiar star system coming into view. It was the system where he had died, where the war was still raging. "We are returning you to the battlefield," the Etherian said. "But the choice of what happens next is yours. You can return as you are now, with your memories of this encounter intact, but otherwise unchanged. Or you can choose the enhancement we offer, accepting all that comes with it." Marcus looked at the alien being that had given him this impossible second chance. "What happens to you if I refuse?" "We continue our slow decline toward irrelevance," the Etherian replied without apparent emotion. "We continue to exist without truly living, masters of a universe we no longer understand how to appreciate. And if I accept, then you become the first of your species to transcend death itself. You become proof that humanity possesses something that even we have lost. You become hope for both our peoples." Marcus thought about all the humans who had died fighting the Zelkari, all the worlds that had been lost, all the people who would never see their homes again. He thought about the torture he had endured, about dying alone on an alien world with nothing but hatred to keep him company. He thought about the satisfaction he had felt when his bullet found General Thaxmore. Most of all, he thought about the war that was still being fought while he stood here, making philosophical decisions. "How does it work?" he asked. The Etherian gestured again, and the altar-like structure he had been lying on began to glow with increasing intensity. "You lie down, you accept the change, and you trust us to guide the process. When you wake up, you will be something new, something that the Zelkari Empire is not prepared to face." Marcus looked out at the stars of the system where he had died. Somewhere down there, human soldiers were still fighting and dying against impossible odds. Somewhere down there, the war was waiting for him to return. He lay back down on the glowing altar. "Do it," he said. The last thing Marcus remembered before the light consumed him completely was the Etherian's voice, speaking words in a language that seemed to resonate directly in his consciousness. The meaning came through clearly despite the alien syllables. "Welcome to immortality, Marcus Chone of Earth. Use it well." When the light faded, both the altar and its occupant were gone, translated across space and possibility to a war that was about to change in ways no one could have anticipated. The Etherian remained alone in the chamber, its large eyes reflecting something that might have been hope for the first time in millennia. Below, on the surface of Kepler 442b, Zelkari forces were about to discover that death was not nearly as permanent as they had believed. Marcus materialized in the exact spot where he had died 40 minutes earlier, his body reforming from particles of light that coalesced into flesh and bone. The transition was seamless, one moment existing as pure energy aboard an Etherian vessel, the next standing fully formed on the scorched mountainside of Kepler 442b. The rocky outcrop where he had made his final stand was still smoking from the plasma bombardment, but now the destruction seemed almost quaint compared to what he had become. His enhanced senses immediately cataloged everything within a 5-kilometer radius. He could hear the heartbeats of individual Zelkari soldiers down in the valley base, could smell the distinctive ozone signature of their energy weapons, could see thermal patterns through solid rock that revealed troop movements and defensive positions. The information flowed into his consciousness without overwhelming him, as natural as breathing had once been. His rifle lay where it had fallen, its scope shattered and its barrel warped from the heat of the bombardment. Marcus reached for the weapon out of habit, then paused as he realized he no longer needed it. The enhancement the Etherians had given him included capabilities that made conventional weapons seem primitive by comparison. He closed his eyes and concentrated, feeling the new neural pathways that had been woven into his consciousness. Energy began to flow through his body, accumulating in his hands until they glowed with barely contained power. When he opened his eyes again, they blazed with blue-white light that would have been visible from orbit. The Zelkari were about to learn that their understanding of human limitations had become dangerously outdated. Marcus began moving down the mountainside with fluid grace that would have been impossible for his unenhanced form. His body flowed around obstacles like water, finding handholds and footholds that shouldn't have been able to support human weight. The rocky terrain that had taken him hours to traverse during his initial approach now passed beneath his feet in minutes. He could sense the enemy forces before they came into visual range. A patrol of 6 Zelkari soldiers was moving up the mountain to investigate the area where his body should have been. They advanced in perfect formation, their energy rifles sweeping back and forth as they searched for any sign of the human sniper who had been causing them so much trouble. Marcus allowed them to approach within 50 meters before he revealed himself, stepping out from behind a boulder that shouldn't have been able to conceal a full-grown human. The lead Zelkari raised his weapon and began to shout a warning to his companions, but the words died in his throat as he saw what the human had become. Marcus's eyes were blazing like twin stars, and energy crackled around his form in patterns that hurt to look at directly. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate in the bones of anyone who heard it. "Tell your empire," Marcus said in perfect Zelkari, the language somehow familiar to him now despite having never learned it, "that death is no longer the ending you thought it was." The soldiers opened fire immediately, their plasma weapons sending coherent energy beams toward the enhanced human. Marcus didn't dodge or seek cover. Instead, he raised his hands and simply absorbed the incoming fire, his body converting the destructive energy into power that made him glow even brighter. The Zelkari weapons' fire continued for several seconds before the soldiers realized their attacks were not just ineffective, but were actually making their target stronger. The lead soldier began backing away, his mandibles clicking in the rapid pattern that indicated extreme fear among his species. Marcus stepped forward and touched the nearest Zelkari on the chest. The alien convulsed as energy flowed through his nervous system, not enough to kill, but more than enough to send him into unconsciousness. The enhanced human moved with impossible speed, touching each soldier in turn until all 6 lay motionless on the rocky ground. They would wake up in a few hours with memories of what they had seen, memories that would spread through the Zelkari ranks like a virus. Marcus wanted them to remember. He wanted word of his return to reach every level of the Empire's command structure. Fear was a weapon that could be just as effective as any rifle. He left the unconscious soldiers behind and continued toward the base, his enhanced senses mapping every defensive position and cataloging every potential threat. The Zelkari had constructed their fortress assuming they would face conventional human tactics, conventional human weapons, conventional human limitations. All of those assumptions were about to become liabilities. The perimeter defenses were sophisticated by galactic standards, but Marcus could see the energy patterns that powered them, could understand their operating principles as if he had designed them himself. Automated turrets tracked across predetermined arcs, their sensors tuned to detect movement and heat signatures within specific parameters. Energy shields flickered at regular intervals, their generators cycling through predictable patterns to manage power consumption. Marcus approached the main gate walking upright, and without any attempt at concealment. The automated systems detected him immediately. Alarms began sounding throughout the base, and defensive weapons swiveled to track his approach. He continued walking at the same steady pace, even as energy beams began converging on his position. The first volley of defensive fire struck him dead center, plasma bolts that should have vaporized any human being. Instead, Marcus absorbed the energy the same way he had absorbed the patrol's weapons fire, his body converting the destructive force into power that enhanced his capabilities even further. The automated systems, following their programming, increased their rate of fire in response to what they interpreted as a missed shot. Marcus laughed, and the sound carried harmonics that caused nearby electronics to malfunction. The defensive turrets began firing erratically, their targeting systems confused by energy readings that made no sense according to their program parameters. Some of the weapons actually turned on each other as their artificial intelligences tried to process the impossible data they were receiving. The main gate was a massive barrier of reinforced materials and energy fields designed to stop everything from infantry assaults to armored vehicles. Marcus walked up to it and placed his palm against the central locking mechanism. Energy flowed from his hand into the gate's control systems, not destroying them, but rewriting their fundamental programming at the quantum level. The gate opened for him like he was an expected guest. Inside the base, Zelkari soldiers were scrambling to respond to what their instruments were telling them was impossible. Plasma cannons were being wheeled into position, elite troops were forming firing lines, and officers were shouting orders in the harsh language of the Empire. All of their preparations assumed they were facing a conventional enemy who could be stopped by conventional means. Marcus walked into the center of the base courtyard and stopped. Around him, hundreds of Zelkari weapons were trained on his position, their operators waiting for the order to open fire. He could see the faces of individual soldiers through their helmet visors, could read the fear and confusion in their alien features. The base commander emerged from the central building, his ornate armor marking him as a high-ranking officer. When he spoke, his voice was amplified by external speakers so that every soldier in the base could hear his words. "You are the human sniper," the commander said in accented English. "The one called the Ghost. We killed you. We verified your death. What kind of deception is this?" Marcus turned to face the commander, his enhanced vision allowing him to see details that would have been invisible to his original form. The Zelkari officer was old by the standards of a species, with scarring that spoke of many battles fought and won. His confidence was genuine, born from decades of successful campaigns against species that had proved no match for Zelkari military might. "No deception," Marcus replied, his voice carrying clearly across the courtyard without any artificial amplification. "I died. You killed me. I came back." The commander made a gesture that was probably the Zelkari equivalent of dismissive laughter. "Impossible. Death is final. There is no return from the void." "There is for humans," Marcus said. "We don't accept limitations the way other species do. When you tell us something is impossible, we take that as a challenge to prove you wrong." The Zelkari officer raised one hand, and every weapon in the base swiveled to target the enhanced human. Energy readings spiked as charging systems powered up to full capacity, and the air began to shimmer with the heat of barely contained plasma. This was enough firepower to level a city block, concentrated on a single human being standing motionless in an open courtyard. "Open fire," the commander ordered. The bombardment that followed was beyond anything Marcus had experienced during his original death. Hundreds of energy weapons discharged simultaneously, their beams converging on his position with surgical precision. The ground beneath his feet turned to molten glass. The air around him became a maelstrom of superheated plasma, and the very molecules of the atmosphere began to dissociate under the incredible energy density. Through it all, Marcus stood unmoving, his body absorbing and converting the destructive force into something else entirely. The energy that should have obliterated him instead flowed into his enhanced physiology, charging systems that the Etherians had woven into his very DNA. When the bombardment finally ceased, he was not just unharmed, but visibly more powerful than before. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the background hum of the base's power systems seemed to have stopped, as if the universe itself was holding its breath to see what would happen next. Marcus raised his own hand, and energy began to flow from his fingers in streams of blue-white light. But instead of destroying anything, the energy sought out and interfaced with every electronic system in the base. Computers began displaying messages in multiple languages. Communication arrays started broadcasting on frequencies that reached across the galaxy, and defensive systems turned their weapons away from their own installations. Within seconds, Marcus had taken complete control of the base's infrastructure without firing a shot or causing any casualties. The Zelkari soldiers found their weapons inoperative, their communication gear hijacked, and their defensive positions turned into elaborate decorations. "I could kill every one of you," Marcus said, his voice now broadcasting from every speaker in the facility. "I could turn your own weapons against you, overload your power systems, or simply drain the life force from your bodies. But I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to deliver a message." The base commander stood frozen, his hands still raised in the gesture that had ordered the bombardment. His alien features showed an expression that needed no translation across species barriers. It was the look of a being whose fundamental understanding of reality had just been shattered. "The war between our species is about to change," Marcus continued. "Humanity has learned something that your empire thought was impossible. We've learned to come back from death itself. Every human soldier you kill, every civilian you murder, every world you destroy just makes us stronger." He gestured, and holographic displays materialized throughout the base, showing images from across the galaxy. Human resistance movements that had been thought destroyed were emerging from hiding with new capabilities. Soldiers who had been confirmed killed in action were appearing on battlefields light years from where they had died. The impossible was becoming routine, and the Zelkari Empire's fundamental advantage was evaporating. "You wanted to study human capabilities," Marcus said to the commander. "Congratulations. You're about to get a comprehensive education." He turned and began walking toward the gate, every step taking him further from the paralyzed Zelkari forces. Behind him, the base's communication systems continued broadcasting his message to every Zelkari installation in the sector, spreading word of humanity's new reality to an empire that was about to discover the true meaning of fear. Marcus paused at the gate and looked back at the hundreds of soldiers who had been powerless to stop him. "Tell your empire," he said, "that the ghost of Titan Station sends his regards." Then he was gone, vanishing into the mountainous terrain with enhanced capabilities that turned the hostile landscape into a highway. Behind him, the Zelkari base began receiving emergency communication from across their territory, reports of impossible human activities that defied every tactical assessment the Empire had ever made. The war was about to become very different indeed. The emergency council session aboard the Zelkari flagship Dominator was unlike any gathering in the Empire's 2,000-year history. Admiral Vextherin, Supreme Commander of the Second Fleet, stood before a holographic assembly of the Empire's highest military leadership, while reports flooded in from across the sector. Each new transmission brought word of impossible human activities that violated every scientific principle the Zelkari had spent millennia establishing. On Rigel Prime, a human demolitions expert who had been confirmed killed in orbital bombardment 3 days earlier had reappeared inside the main ammunition depot. Security footage showed him walking through solid walls, absorbing energy weapon fire, and systematically destroying the facility with capabilities that seemed drawn from pure science fiction. The blast had been visible from space. From the Tau Ceti system came reports of a human pilot whose fighter had been destroyed in full view of dozens of Zelkari witnesses. 47 minutes later, he had materialized aboard the enemy flagship, somehow bypassing every defensive system and security protocol. By the time Zelkari forces responded, he had downloaded the entire tactical database and vanished as mysteriously as he had appeared. Most disturbing of all were the reports from Kepler 442b itself, where the sniper Marcus Chun had not only returned from verified death, but had demonstrated abilities that seemed to transcend the known laws of physics. Base Commander Thrall Maxim's testimony, transmitted under full security encryption, described a being who could control energy itself, who could interface with Zelkari technology as if he had designed it, and who had delivered a message that was now spreading throughout the Empire like a plague. Admiral Vextherin was a veteran of 17 major campaigns, a strategic genius who had personally overseen the conquest of 43 worlds. His tactical assessments had been studied at military academies across the Empire, and his understanding of human capabilities was considered authoritative by the Imperial command structure. All of that expertise was now worthless in the face of an enemy that refused to stay dead. Analysis Division, the Admiral said, his voice carrying the authority of absolute command, explained to me how any of this is possible. Science Admiral Kethronin stepped forward, her mandibles clicking nervously as she consulted the data streaming across her personal display. Sir, our preliminary findings suggest that humanity has somehow developed technology that allows consciousness transfer at the moment of biological death. The subjects retain their memories, skills, and personalities while gaining access to capabilities that our science cannot yet classify. Magic, then? Admiral Vextherin's tone made it clear what he thought of such explanations. Not magic, sir. Technology so advanced that it appears magical to our current understanding. The energy patterns we've detected around these enhanced humans suggest they're somehow interfacing directly with the quantum substrate of reality itself. The Admiral studied the tactical displays surrounding his position, each one showing human resistance movements that had been thought eliminated, now striking with impossible effectiveness. The Empire's advance, which had been proceeding like clockwork for months, had suddenly ground to a halt as previously dead humans reappeared with capabilities that made conventional military responses ineffective. Intelligence Division, Vextherin continued. What do we know about the source of these enhancements? Intelligence Admiral Morthek activated his own displays, showing deep space sensor readings from across the sector. We've detected energy signatures consistent with a previously unknown spacefaring species. The readings suggest technology at least a millennium beyond our current capabilities. It appears that humanity has found allies. Allies capable of resurrection technology. Vextherin's tone carried a note of disbelief that was becoming common in Zelkari command circles. The evidence suggests exactly that, sir. Furthermore, our analysts believe that each human death followed by resurrection makes the enhancement process more efficient. The enemy is literally becoming stronger every time we kill them. The implications of this were staggering. The Zelkari military doctrine was based on attrition, wearing down enemy forces through superior technology and overwhelming firepower until resistance collapsed. But if human casualties were becoming assets rather than losses, the fundamental logic of warfare had been turned upside down. Admiral Vextherin turned to the Strategic Planning Division. Options. Strategic Admiral Yalmedrin had been working around the clock since the first resurrection reports, running tactical simulations and consulting the Empire's most sophisticated predictive models. Sir, conventional military responses appear to be counterproductive. Every engagement with enhanced humans results in their capabilities increasing while our forces suffer normal attrition rates. Then, what do you recommend? Withdrawal to defensive positions while we develop countermeasures. We need time to understand this new technology before we can effectively combat it. The suggestion sent ripples of shock through the assembled command staff. The Zelkari Empire had not withdrawn from any conflict in over 3 centuries. Their military reputation was built on inexorable advance, on the certainty that resistance would eventually collapse under sustained pressure. Retreat was not just tactically unthinkable, it was psychologically devastating. Unacceptable, Admiral Vextheron said flatly. The Empire does not retreat from primitive species, regardless of their technological assistance. We will find a way to permanently eliminate these enhanced humans. Sir, Intelligence Admiral Morthek interjected, we've identified the individual responsible for the Kepler 442b incident. Marcus Chun, formerly a staff sergeant in the human military. Our records show he was responsible for significant casualties among our forces before his apparent death. Admiral Vextheron studied the holographic display showing Marcus's service record, including tactical analyses of his sniper operations. One human caused all of this disruption. His resurrection appears to have been the first successful implementation of the enhancement technology. He's now operating far behind our lines, systematically targeting command and control installations. Our current estimates suggest he's single-handedly responsible for the destruction of 14 major facilities in the past 18 hours. The Admiral felt something that Zelkari rarely experienced: genuine uncertainty. His species had conquered the galaxy through careful planning, technological superiority, and the patient application of overwhelming force. But all of those advantages were meaningless against an enemy that became more dangerous with every defeat. What about the aliens providing this technology? He asked. Science Admiral Kethronen consulted her readings again. We've designated them the Unknown Species Alpha. Deep space sensors have detected at least 37 vessels of unprecedented design moving through our territory. They appear to be observing our responses to the enhanced humans, but they haven't engaged directly. Are they a threat? Sir, their technology appears to be sufficiently advanced that they could eliminate our entire fleet without significant effort. The fact that they haven't done so suggests they're more interested in studying the conflict than ending it. Admiral Vextheron was beginning to understand that the Empire faced something unprecedented. Not just an enemy with superior technology, but an enemy whose very nature challenged the fundamental assumptions upon which Zelkari society was built. They had conquered hundreds of species by demonstrating that resistance was futile, that death was final, that submission was the only logical response to superior force. But humans seemed to have eliminated death from the equation entirely. Communications, the Admiral ordered, open a channel to the enhanced human on Kepler 442b. The bridge crew worked frantically to establish contact, their equipment struggling to lock onto the energy signature that surrounded Marcus Chun. When the connection finally stabilized, the holographic display showed the human standing on a mountainside, his eyes blazing with the same blue-white energy that had terrified the base garrison. Admiral Vextheron of the Zelkari Second Fleet, the Admiral announced. I would speak with the one called Marcus Chun. Marcus turned toward the communication probe, his enhanced senses apparently capable of detecting the transmission source across vast distances. I'm listening. Explain to me how any of this is possible. Which part? Marcus asked. The resurrection technology, the enhancement process, or the fact that humans don't give up even when we're dead? Admiral Vextheron studied the enhanced human through the display. Despite all the tactical reports and scientific analysis, Marcus still looked fundamentally human. Enhanced capabilities aside, he retained the basic bipedal form and facial structure of his species. But there was something in his eyes, a depth of purpose that seemed to transcend normal biological limitations. All of it, the Admiral said. The technology came from allies who've been watching this war with interest, Marcus explained. They're impressed by humanity's refusal to accept defeat, even under impossible circumstances. So they decided to give us the tools to make that refusal more effective. And the cost? Advanced species don't provide such gifts without expecting something in return. Marcus smiled, and the expression somehow managed to be both reassuring and terrifying. The cost is that we become something new, something that your empire isn't prepared to face, something that challenges your fundamental assumption that superior technology guarantees victory. What do you want? Admiral Vextheron asked. We want you to leave, Marcus said simply. Pack up your fleets, abandon your occupied territories, and return to whatever hole you crawled out of. The age of Zelkari expansion is over. The admiral felt his mandibles click in a pattern that indicated extreme agitation. Impossible. The Empire does not negotiate with inferior species. We're not inferior anymore, Marcus pointed out. And we're not negotiating. We're giving you fair warning that continuing this war will only make things worse for your empire. Threats? From a single enhanced human. Marcus gestured, and the communication display expanded to show views from across the galaxy. Human resistance movements were emerging everywhere, their fighters displaying the same enhanced capabilities that Marcus possessed. Zelkari installations were falling with increasing frequency, and Imperial forces were finding themselves helpless against enemies who could absorb their weapons' fire and turn their own technology against them. Not threats, Marcus corrected. Observations. Every human you kill comes back stronger. Every battle you fight teaches us more about your weaknesses. Every day this war continues, we become more capable of ending it permanently. Admiral Vextherin realized he was looking at the end of everything his empire had built, not through superior firepower or technological advancement, but through the simple refusal of one species to accept the logic of defeat. The humans had found a way to turn death itself into a weapon, and the implications were beyond anything the Zelkari had ever faced. This conversation is over, he said, and terminated the communication. But as he looked around the bridge at his officers, Admiral Vextherin knew that the war his empire had been fighting was already over. They just hadn't admitted it yet. Marcus Chen stood on the mountainside, watching the communication probe fade back into normal space, his enhanced senses already tracking the movements of Zelkari forces across the system. They were regrouping, consolidating their positions, preparing for a defensive campaign that would only delay the inevitable. The humans were coming home, and death was no longer an obstacle to that return. 6 months after the first resurrection, Marcus Chen stood on the observation deck of the human flagship Persistence, watching as the last Zelkari fleet retreated from the Sol system. The blue-white energy that had become his signature still flickered around his enhanced form, but now it seemed more controlled, more purposeful. Around him, dozens of other enhanced humans watched the historic moment with expressions that ranged from satisfaction to quiet determination. The war was ending not with a climactic battle, but with a systematic collapse of Zelkari resistance. Every engagement had resulted in human casualties that became human reinforcements 40 minutes later. Every tactical victory for the Empire had ultimately strengthened their enemies. The mathematics of attrition had been completely reversed, and even the most stubborn Zelkari commanders had eventually accepted the inevitable. Commander Sarah Martinez materialized beside Marcus in a cascade of golden light, her own enhancement process having given her abilities that complemented his perfectly. She had died holding the line at New Singapore, buying time for civilian evacuations that had saved 2 million lives. Her resurrection had made her into something that could move through space and time as easily as walking across a room. Final report from the Centauri sector, she said, her voice carrying harmonics that spoke of power held in perfect control. The Zelkari are evacuating their last strongholds. Admiral Vextherin himself requested safe passage for civilian transports. Marcus nodded, his enhanced vision tracking the retreating ships across interstellar distances. Any word from the outer colonies? All liberated. The resistance movements you sparked have been systematically freeing every human world the Empire captured. Most of the Zelkari forces just left when they realized what they were facing. It had been an unprecedented campaign in galactic history, not because of the technology involved or the scale of the conflict, but because of its fundamental nature. The Zelkari Empire had spent millennia conquering species that eventually accepted defeat when the casualties became unsustainable. But humans had turned death itself into a strategic resource, creating a military paradigm that no conventional force could counter. Dr. James Reeves, who had been killed in a medical facility on Tau Ceti and had returned with the ability to interface directly with biological systems, approached with his latest analysis of the enhancement process. We've confirmed successful resurrections for over 40,000 human casualties, he reported. The Etherian technology is adapting to work more efficiently with each implementation. The enhancement potential appears to be limitless. Marcus thought about the implications of those numbers. 40,000 humans who had died fighting the Zelkari were now enhanced beings with capabilities that bordered on the godlike. Each one was a force multiplier beyond anything conventional military doctrine could account for. Each one was proof that humanity refused to accept the limitations that other species considered absolute. Any problems with the integration? Marcus asked. The enhancement process was still relatively new, and they were all still learning the full extent of their transformed capabilities. Remarkably few, Dr. Reeves replied. The Etherian modifications seemed to work in harmony with human neurology. If anything, the enhanced individuals are showing increased psychological stability. It's as if the trauma of death and resurrection actually strengthens human resilience rather than breaking it. Commander Martinez gestured toward the tactical displays surrounding the observation deck. Speaking of the Etherians, they've been requesting another meeting with you. Something about the next phase of their plan. Marcus had been expecting this. The Etherians hadn't provided their resurrection technology out of altruism. They had made it clear from the beginning that humanity represented something they had lost, something they needed to reclaim. The successful conclusion of the war against the Zelkari was probably just the first step in whatever they had planned. Set up the meeting, Marcus said. But this time I want our enhanced leadership present. Whatever they're proposing, humanity should hear it together. Within hours, the meeting was arranged aboard an Etherian vessel that had materialized in the Sol system without triggering any of Earth's defensive systems. The ship was even larger than Marcus remembered, its organic architecture pulsing with life and energy that seemed to resonate with his enhanced nervous system. As he and the other human leaders were transported aboard, Marcus reflected on how much had changed since his first encounter with these beings. The Etherian representative was the same individual who had overseen Marcus's initial resurrection. But now the aliens seemed different somehow. More vibrant, more present, as if observing humanity's transformation had awakened something that had been dormant for millennia. When it spoke, its musical voice carried undertones of excitement that hadn't been there before. You have exceeded our most optimistic projections, the Etherian began. Not just in your military effectiveness, but in your adaptation to the enhancement process. Most species that achieve immortality lose their drive for growth, their capacity for change. Humans have become more human, not less. Marcus studied the alien's expression, looking for signs of hidden agendas or ulterior motives. What happens now? You've given us the tools to win our war. What do you expect in return? We expect you to teach us, the Etherian replied. To show us how to rediscover what we lost when we achieved perfection. To help us remember what it means to grow, to struggle, to become something greater than what we were. Commander Martinez leaned forward. You're talking about some kind of exchange program? More than that, the alien said. We're proposing a merger of capabilities. Your species has proven that enhancement doesn't diminish the qualities that make growth possible. Our species has technologies and knowledge that could accelerate human development by millennia. Together, we could become something unprecedented. Dr. Reeves activated his enhanced analytical abilities, his consciousness expanding to process the implications of what was being proposed. You're suggesting that humans and Etherians work together to transcend the limitations of both species. Precisely. But the choice must be freely made by each individual and each species. We will not impose our will the way the Zelkari attempted to do. The partnership must be voluntary, or it serves no purpose. Marcus thought about the 40,000 enhanced humans who had died and returned, about the countless more who were still learning what their new capabilities meant. He thought about Earth itself, now free from the threat of conquest, but faced with questions about what humanity would become next. He thought about the Zelkari Empire, retreating to lick its wounds, and probably planning some kind of eventual comeback. Most of all, he thought about the satisfaction he had felt when his bullet had taken down General Thaxmore, and how that satisfaction had grown into something much larger. The determination to ensure that no species would ever again threaten humanity's freedom to choose its own destiny. What would this partnership look like? He asked. The Etherian gestured, and the walls around them became transparent, revealing a vista that took everyone's breath away. Thousands of ships filled the space around Earth, some clearly human in design, but enhanced with Etherian technology, others purely alien, but somehow welcoming. In the distance, construction was already underway on structures that seemed to bridge the gap between organic growth and technological achievement. Shared knowledge, shared capabilities, shared exploration of what consciousness can become when it's no longer limited by biological constraints, the alien explained. Your species would retain its independence, its culture, its essential nature. But you would also gain access to technologies and perspective that have taken us millions of years to develop. And in exchange, you teach us to dream again. You show us how to want something more than we already have. You help us rediscover the capacity for growth that we sacrificed when we achieved technological mastery. Marcus looked around at his fellow enhanced humans, seeing in their faces the same mixture of caution and excitement that he felt himself. They had already transcended death itself, had already proven that human determination could overcome seemingly impossible odds. But this was offering them the chance to transcend much more than that. "We'll need time to discuss this," Marcus said. Humanity has always been suspicious of gifts that seem too good to be true. The Etherian made the musical sound that served as laughter among its species. Suspicion is another quality we lost long ago. Take all the time you need. We have waited this long to find a species worthy of partnership. We can wait longer if necessary. As the human delegation was transported back to their own ships, Marcus found himself thinking about the sniper rifle he had carried through so many missions. It was still on Kepler 442b, still broken and abandoned where it had fallen during his death. Perhaps it was time to go back and retrieve it, not because he needed it anymore, but because it represented something important about where humanity had come from. They had started this war as a species armed with projectile weapons and chemical explosives, facing an empire that commanded energy manipulation and faster-than-light travel. They had ended it as beings who could control energy itself, who could transcend the limitations of mortality, who could turn their own deaths into strategic advantages. But they were still human. Still the same species that had refused to surrender when surrender seemed logical. Still the same people who had looked at impossible odds and decided to make them possible instead. Marcus smiled as he watched Earth growing larger through the viewports of the Persistence. Whatever came next, whether it was partnership with the Etherians or some new challenge that hadn't revealed itself yet, humanity would face it the same way they always had. Together, stubborn, absolutely refusing to accept that anything was truly impossible. The war against the Zelkari was over. The age of human transcendence was just beginning, and somewhere in a galaxy, other species were about to learn the same lesson the Empire had learned the hard way. When humans decide they're not going to stay dead, death itself becomes just another obstacle to overcome. And humans had always been very good at overcoming obstacles, no matter how impossible they might seem. The universe was about to become a much more interesting place.